Alrighty, so for this next chapter, we're dealing with Ross chapter 10, and I'm going to just jot that down over here. So Ross chapter 10. This has to do with what's called the cal-perfect conjugation. You'll find this on page 86. Okay? Now, before we actually start, I want to just give you a real quick overview of the Hebrew verbal system. Now, this is going to be very, very, very cursory. But in Hebrew, we have some words that we're going to be using, and it's important that we at least have something of a concept for this as we begin. Hebrew has verbs that consist of roots, okay? Now, when I say root, what I mean is the three consonants that make up the semantic core of the verb. For example, you have seen the verb yashav, haven't you? What's yashav mean? He dwelled, or he lived. The three root letters are yod, shin, beth. You have seen the verb halach. What does that mean? He walked or went. The three root letters are hey, lamed, kaf. So both of these verbs mean he blanked, but what specifically the action involves is represented by the three root letters. So those are the three consonants that make up the core of the verb. We'll refer to that as the verbal root, okay, three consonants. And then Hebrew also, in its verbal system, has patterns that are called stems. And those stems are going to basically indicate how the subject is related to the verbal action. Okay? So stems have to do with how the subject relates to the verbal action. That is to say, sometimes a subject performs the action. We call that an active verb. Sometimes the subject is not doing the action, but is acted upon. So if I say John ate the chicken, John is the subject, John's doing the eating. That's an active verb. If I, on the other hand, say the chicken was eaten, there the chicken is the subject, but the chicken ain't eaten nothing, right? Rather, the chicken is being eaten or has been eaten. The action is done to the subject. That's called a passive verb. And these stems are patterns that indicate that relationship of the subject to the verbal action. Now, in Hebrew, there are 7 stems, and I've got them written out right here: the kal, nifal, piel, pual, hifil, hofal, and hithpael. We are only going to focus on the kal stem. The kal stem is the most basic stem in Hebrew, and in this sort of stem, basically the subject does the verbal action. Okay, that's the basic stem, the kal. In the nifal stem is what you use, the pattern you use when the subject has the action done to it. So it makes the kal passive. Okay, the piel and pual are related to each other, where the piel sometimes intensifies a verbal action, and the pual stem is basically the same as the PL stem, except the subject's active in the PL and it's passive in the pual. The hifil and the hofal are what are called causative stems. So in those, the subject causes someone to do an action. So in the hifil, I might say something like, he caused someone to visit somebody. All right? And in the hofal is he was caused to visit somebody. That makes the hifil meaning passive. And the hithpael is one that involves the subject doing action to himself or herself, or plural subjects acting upon one another in reciprocal fashion. So I could say something like they killed one another. I'd use the hithpael stem for that. All right? So just giving you a preview here, there are 7 stems. We're focusing on the kal stem, where the subject is simply the agent or the doer of the verbal action. Now, within each stem, there are conjugation patterns that relate to how how the action is being portrayed. And today, in this chapter, we're learning about the perfect conjugation, all right? And we're going to spend some more time talking about that. In the perfect conjugation, when the subject performs the verb, that verb is being portrayed or presented from the perspective of the whole action or the whole activity. If I use the imperfect, I'm portraying that action as not complete, as maybe in progress or repeated or habitual action. Usually when I use the perfect, it'll be past time. And usually when I use the imperfect, it'll be non-past time, either present or future. But hear me well. The Hebrew verbal system is not really a tense system like we have in English and like you understand in languages like Spanish or German or French, okay? It's not a tense prominent system. The perfect tends to be used for past time action, but it can be used in present tense as well. The imperfect tends to be used for the future, but it can be used for present or past action as well. Okay, so don't map perfect to past and imperfect to future. That's not the way it truly works. But verbs will occur in some conjugation pattern. Verbs will have person, that is to say, they'll either be first, second, or third person. We'll talk about the persons in just a moment. Verbs will be marked for gender, that is, the subject will be masculine, feminine, or the C stands for common. And verbs will also be marked for number, that is, singular versus plural. All right, so verbs will be encoded with information that relates to all these things. So they are a relatively complex creature. Again, we're focusing on the cow perfect in chapter 10. So let's go through this handout now. In this chart that we've got below, the three boxes are going to be representing any three root letters of any standard strong Hebrew verb. Now, when I say strong verb, what I mean is that the letters that make up those three consonants, those three root letters, they're not weak letters. Weak letters are guttural letters, for example. You remember how gutturals do funny things. Also, the letters that can quiesce, yod and hey and aleph, those are also weak in a fashion. So when I'm talking about a strong verb, I'm talking about a verb that doesn't have any weaknesses that cause it to be irregular. Now, at the end of the boxes, we have suffixes, and those suffixes represent the doer of the verbal action. So if you take a look here, this is like Spanish. If you've done any studies in Spanish or French, the endings of verbs in Spanish mark who the subject is. Hablo is I speak. That O signifies I. Hablas, you speak. Habla, he, she, or it speaks. Okay, so I'm changing the ending to mark who the subject is. This happens in Hebrew as well. So no ending means he did it. Comma te ending means she did it, and so forth. So we'll talk about these in just a moment. But these suffixes are what I like to call personal endings because they indicate the person doing the verbal action. No matter which verb is being used, if you see these endings, then you will know who the subject is. Let's talk about the person, gender, number categories here. In Hebrew, when we show the forms of a Hebrew verb, we're going to go in the opposite order that you're accustomed to going when you learn English and Spanish and other languages. And in those languages, we start with I, as in I eat, you eat, right? He, she, or it eats, and so forth. Look at what we're doing in Hebrew. We're starting with the he and the it, okay? And we're working our way down to I. So that's backwards. There's a reason for this, and I'll explain it in just a moment. But I just want to talk about what these mean. So in terms of person, third person is he, she, it, or they, okay? Second person refers to the addressee. and that's you or y'all, depending on whether it's singular or plural. First person refers to the speaker. I, if it's singular, and we, if it's plural. Okay? So there's basically three persons here. I is the speaker. Second person, y'all, is the addressee. And basically, everybody else is third person. Anyone besides the I and the you. So, if I had a sentence like, Moses loves hot dogs, they would have to be Hebrew national ones. But Moses loves hot dogs. What person is Moses? First, second, or third person? Moses is third person. That's right. And if I were to replace the name Moses with a pronoun, which pronoun would I use? He, and you can see he is in the third person category, right? So any he, she, it, or they, or just some person who's not the I or the you, or the we or the you, that is third person reference. And Hebrew is able to mark the person, the gender, and the number in its Hebrew verbs in the perfect. Okay? Now, if you'll notice over here, 3ms then is third masculine singular. If the verb is marked for third masculine singular, then a he did it or an it did it, but the it is grammatically a masculine it. Remember, we don't have a neuter gender in Hebrew. So, the word horse, for example, sus. Sus is masculine, right? But if I didn't have the word sus as my subject, but I just had the third masculine singular form of the verb, where the sus is the subject, I would say it did something, okay? Not he did something. All right, 3CP, what does that stand for? Third common plural. The C here for common means common gender. In other words, when the verb has they as the subject, we do not have a special form for masculine plural or feminine plural third person. They're the same. All right? Now, when you are the subject in Hebrew, we will distinguish the masculine singular from the feminine singular you, and we will also distinguish the masculine plural from the feminine plural of you or y'all. All right? And then in the first person, the 1CS means first common singular. So a verb with a first common singular personal ending could be any gender. So if I'm a woman, I'm going to use the same form of I did something as a man would use. Okay, the form is the same. It's a common form for both. And if we did something and we're men or women, we use the same form. Okay, there's no distinction there. Now, let's take a look here at this little chart with the boxes that represent, theoretically, any three root letters of any Hebrew verb, okay? What I'm giving you here is just a layout of the personal endings for the perfect conjugation. These personal endings will apply to the perfect conjugation of all 7 stems. The cal stem has a perfect conjugation. The nifal stem has a perfect conjugation. The pl and pual have perfect conjugations. It doesn't matter which stem we're dealing with. All of them use the same endings here, okay? So once you learn this for the cal, guess what? You've learned the endings for all the other 6 stems too, okay? So this is great. Now, because we are changing the suffixes here to indicate who's doing the action, the perfect conjugation is also sometimes referred to as the suffix conjugation. So you will see both of those expressions used for this type of conjugation pattern, the suffix conjugation or the perfect conjugation. Now let's look at what happens. The 3 root letters are going to come first, and then if there is no ending, I like to put a 0 with a slash line for 0 ending, then that means the subject is he or a masculine it, okay? So he did something. For right now, we're going to translate the perfect as if it's past, simple past action, but with the caveat, remember that it's not always a past tense verb form. Okay, if I add a comma te to root 3, then it means that she did it. If I add the word or the syllable ta to the end, then that means you man did it. Okay, now take a look here very carefully. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. what kind of a shava do I have here if this begat kafat letter tav has a dagesh lene in it? What kind of shava is this? It's silent, because if it were vocal, what would happen to my dagesh lene? It would go away. Okay? So what I'm wanting you to see here is that this shava is silent here under root 3. So it's ta, not tha. Ta, ta. All right? So that means you man did it, 2ms. If I have a tav with a silent shava following root 3's silent shava, then this is just going to be pronounced t, t. Okay? And that means you woman did it. And then T on the end means I did it. And again, there's a silent shava. So wherever root 3 has a shava, the shava is silent. Okay? Now, let me just talk about the word vocalic here, because I've put that next to the A. I've transliterated the vowels, or the endings here. The comments say is an A with our circumflex symbol, or that's also known as the caret. Ta, t, and t. All right? The word vocalic means that the ending is a vowel or starts with a vowel. And that's to be contrasted with these endings, which are consonantal. Okay? Consonantal endings start with a consonant. So the vowel A is vocalic. It's a vocalic personal ending. Ta, t, and t start with consonants. They are consonantal endings. So look at the shurik over here for third common plural. They did something. Is that vocalic or consonantal? That is vocalic. Very good. It's a shurik and it is vocalic. Okay? To say y'all did something, I'm going to add tem to root 3 with a silent shava. That's consonantal. Ten means you women. So you men, you women is 10. That's consonantal. Nu is we did something. And that's consonantal because it starts with an N. All right? So all of my consonantal endings are where? They are second person and below, right? All of the vocalic endings are in the third person forms, except for the 3ms because there's no ending. So it's neither consonantal nor vocalic. All right? So just keep in mind the vocalic endings are up here. All the consonantal endings are below. Now, how do vocalic endings differ? Well, remember, a vowel can't occur all by itself as a syllable, can it? So if I put a vowel after root 3, it's going to need a lead consonant. So the root 3 consonant will not close the syllable with root 2 like it does in these other ones. The root 3 consonant will slide over and lead each of these vocalic endings, these vowels. And so we're going to see how that looks over here. Yes? Yes, they are both silent. So you remember how we said you can't have two vocal shavas in a row, right? You can't have two vocal shavas in a row. At the beginning of a word, we'll have the Red Rider shoot out an eye. In the middle of a word, you can have two shavas side by side, but they're not both the same, are they? In the middle of the word, the first shava is silent because that consonant's closing the syllable, and the next shava is vocal. But then at the end of a word, you can have two shavas, but they're both going to be silent, okay? So let's take a quick look at the forms here.